Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. I want to welcome you to this month's P&G Alumni Network Enrichment Series webinar. I'm your host, Liliana Rojas, and I hope you're all safe and well. Today, we have two wonderful guests with us, but before we start our conversation and I pass it on to them, I want to tell you a little bit about the Enrichment Series. This is a monthly series where our goal is to connect our members and provide enriching content where we hope that you learn something new and leave you inspired. And we do this by leveraging the expertise that we have within the network. All of this is part of a bigger mission of the P&G alumni, which is a nonprofit founded by former P&G employees to share ideas, talents, and resources with each other, our communities, and philanthropy efforts. We have more than 35,000 registered members in 45 chapters worldwide, and the P&G Alumni Network is officially recognized by Procter & Gamble. We connect via global conferences, local chapters, industry events, and online content. And our nonprofit foundation supports economic empowerment initiatives in communities all around the world. Now, this is your webinar screen. For those of you that know Zoom, you're probably pretty familiar, but those that don't, you'll be able to interact with our speakers today through the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen. Feel free to do that. You also have a chat function, so you can communicate that way as well. I'll make sure to review all of the Q&As and chat and anything that you share in the chat and share it with our guests throughout and at the end of the session. If I don't get to all of the questions, I'll try to do my best. Now, let me share some polls before we jump right in. And this is just to hear and to learn a little bit of our audience. It's always important for us to know who's out there. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Let me launch the second one. Thank you. The third one. And we're almost there. Thank you. And we have the last one. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay. So then Without further ado, let me introduce you to Filippo Passerini and Tony Saldanha, who are going to share with us how to lead a best-in-class business process and their tips on how to do that. So let me stop sharing my screen so that, Tony, you can share yours.
Awesome. Well, hi, everybody. Filippo, let me just turn it over to you. We'll get started,
Wonderful.
and then we'll do the material sharing at the appropriate time. Go ahead, please.
Well, it's a great pleasure to reconnect with so many friends and former colleagues. We can't say your names, but I'm sure we know each other all very, very well. And of course, you know Tony. So we will spare you an introduction here. But we would love to hear your names, or even if you can come on a screen. I don't know if that is technically possible, but certainly to know your name as you chime in during this conversation, because the intent is exactly that, is to have a dialogue. The long story short is that Tony and I wrote a book. And to be clear, we are not here today to commercialize this book or to sell a few more copies. Not at all. The intent is to share how we got to this point, and I'm positive that for many of you, you will, recognize the models, the frameworks behind what we'll be sharing, and you have been part of this journey. I'm sure most of you, all of you, have been part of it. So the subject is fundamentally how to make sure that what we call business processes, finance, supply chain, sales, marketing, HR, IT, which in most companies are always a necessary hell. Companies that sell products, services, and the processes you need to support the R&D, the commercial part of the business is always try to minimize cost, to make it more efficient, but it's never truly focus, important um, priorities or an opportunities. So what we are contending with Tony, and this is what the book is all about, is that there is a model which has much of what we learned in Procter and Gamble. And then after both Tony and I left P&G, we had the opportunity to not only apply some of the learnings, but continue to learn from other companies we've been supporting as advisor. There is a model that can truly make this process a competitive advantage, not a commodity, not a back office, but a competitive edge for the business. To an extent, we have been able to accomplish some of that in P&G, some of the building blocks, some of the operating models we put in place. And again, all of you have been part of that, I'm sure. So thank you so much again. And Tony and I would like to share with you a few highlights, a few elements of this model, and then sooner rather than later, as soon as possible, open the forum for dialogue, which is the most important part. So we will keep our storytelling very, very brief, and with that, we will share with you what is our thinking, how we got to this point, and any feedback, any thoughts you may have would be wonderful. So this is the background in 3 minutes, and with that, Tony, on to you for a couple of slides, and then we will play Duo and go through the model.
Thank you, Filippo. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. It's really, really nice to be back with family, as they say here. Very nice to see you all. Let me do this. I want to give a little bit of context on why this particular topic around revolutionizing business operations is so important in today's world, right? Filippo is correct. This has been actually a wonderful journey, not just to kind of share some of the models that were developed over time, but also to learn in context about the world around us. If you can see the slide that talks about business operations, one of the things that Filippo and I realized as we kind of got into this topic was that, with every era, there are one or two business operations type of technologies that completely change the way business is done, right? Whether it is the division of labor, as you kind of go, old Adam Smith, or even production lines of Fords, or, so on and so forth. I'll let you look at the slide by yourself. Something comes along every few decades that completely changes the way operations are run in a business, right? In today's world, of course, we all know that as digital technologies, right? But the interesting thing is that once that happens, it leaves it up to people like you and me, other business partners, to figure out how they're going to change along with it, right? And typically, and we're talking about internal operations, we're talking about, the finance and HR and, a lot of the processes. Typically, there's a couple of ways to deal with the incoming change. One is some prime mover. It could be the CEO of the company, it could be a burning platform, external providers, external stakeholders, or it could be a forward-thinking person within the company. They are the prime movers. They realize that we're going to have to change. And, it's up to them to then drive the change. That sounds great, except for one thing. Often that person doesn't exist, isn't there, right? But even when they are, even when companies change, we know from statistics that transformations fail about 70% of the time. And of course, if they fail, the company becomes uncompetitive. So it is with that insight, as we got deep into this, that we realized that there is an opportunity to take a lot of the learnings, people like yourselves and us, we somehow did that intuitively. But over a period of time, it became obvious that there are some good best-in-class ways to drive change. And this is really what we started to put together in a model. And to describe the model, Filippo, let me turn this over to you.
Very good. So this model, we will take you very, very quickly, stage by stage. But fundamentally, the model, as you can see, is three drivers on the left and 4 phases of evolution. The 3 drivers are what we would like to really, really highlight. Something that I think in Procter & Gamble we did pretty well. And actually, for those of you who were with Procter & Gamble in 2001, 2002, when I first became CEO, and then we implemented organization 2004. You remember how clear was the focus on consumer is boss, speaking of open market rules. Unified accountability in what at the time was called the MDO, the GBU, GBS. And then how the model, the operating engine was a trolley between 2001, 2002, 2007, up until 2007, 2008. To trolley change very, very dynamically and adjust to the changing market conditions. And then, if we look at the verticals, stage one is what we call the fault, every single company. And this is what also happened to Procter and Gamble in those years. Tend to optimize their functional McAfees, so in finance, in insurance, supply chain, marketing, all the functions, of course, um, procurement. You will try to operate more cost effectively. You will try to eliminate defects, to eliminate issues. The metrics, the KPI you use are pretty much on efficiency. So you will count the number of touch points. You will, and accountability, of course, is in place, but it is very, very siloed. So you have accountability within the individual functions. So you remember how well Procter and Gamble did in the 90s in supply chain, for example. It was a very, very strong unified accountability. Also, finance has been very, very strong in unified accountabilities, but it is always in silos. And the operating model is very, very dynamic. It's very, very static. So, as a Tony indicated, the challenge we have here is that this process has become very stagnant. And so companies, and we have seen that well beyond the Procter and Gamble, that's why we wrote this book. Companies, every now and then, 3, 4, 5 years, will do a transformation, a reorganization, and dramatic change. A lot of pain, a lot of challenges. Sometimes there is a downsizing associated with that. And then if you want to evolve, this is fundamentally what you have to do. You go from what is efficiency only to effectiveness, as you see, that drive customer experience. And customer could be an external customer, or could be an internal customer, it could be a business partner in a business unit, and what we call in Procter and Gamble and MDO and so forth. And then you see the unified accountability now is not any longer siloed, which means, fragmented or even duplicated. But now you have end-to-end accountability. And so if you take a process as a classic as accounts payables, is not divided into 3 separate functions with a lot of hands off, a lot of touch points, a lot of interfaces between people, between systems. But now you have a clear end-to-end management. I have to say that in Procter and Gamble in the mid 2000, late 2000, this has been truly a major intervention. And then establish metrics which are based on business outcome. For example, speaking for ourselves, for Tony, for myself, in GBS, the scorecard was in total 8 measures for the entire organization. And these were completely business outcomes where, cost, capital, user set, business unit set, everything that was truly on the business outcome. So if companies want to move from stage 1 to stage 2, this is what we recommend we have to do. And again, not try to commercialize the book in any ways, but in the book there is a number of questions that people can answer or can follow to move from stage 1 to the stage 2. So as you see, and I am passing the baton back to Tony, we go from efficiency to effectiveness. And this is where the transition to stage 2 is all about.
Thank you, Filippo. So once you kind of move from the early evolution, which is all about efficiency, right? How do you automate? How do you standardize? How do you get technology so that you can do your internal processes? And as much as possible, those are driven end to end, order to cash, procure to pay, right? And that's typically the starting point. But then there is, as you all know, a line that you have to be careful. It is not efficiency at any cost. Those of you that have tried to get customer support these days in any large company, whether it's an airline or whatever it is, and get endlessly cycled through robots and 15-minute wait lines for somebody in some corner of the world to give you a very poor answer, you know exactly what I'm talking about. People have overdone the efficiency piece and are actually limited on effectiveness. And that's really the next stage of process transformation, where you can then apply the mindset of, hey, we operate as an internal organization, right? Whether it's finance or HR or whatever it is. We operate not as monopolies, but we operate with the mindset that we have to earn our living within the company, that it is possible that any day the company could say, hey, no, we don't need you, right? We can actually buy that service from somewhere else, right? You have to operate with that mindset. And that's really some of the second stage drivers, which is how do you identify business outcomes, right? Not just efficiency, total business outcomes. What are the metrics? And then how do you identify within that entire end-to-end process? You may have in order to cash somebody that really just is focused on order management and somebody else that's focused on cash. Is there an end-to-end person that can be held accountable on behalf of the entire company? That's unified accountability. And of course, the operating model, which is how to drive constant change. And you can drive that through transparency of costs, transparency of metrics. That's really what we're talking about when we say stage 2. And then, of course, there's a few things you can do as you go from effectiveness to even, additional capabilities through innovation. Filippo, let me turn that over to you for innovation.
Yeah, so interesting, just a personal anecdotal story. I've been with the same credit card for 30 years. I had honestly to cancel at some point, and that was a few weeks ago. For the last 3, 4, 5 years, I've seen what focusing on efficiency alone was all about. You get on a chat, and there is the customer service team answering. So you give all the data, your name, what is the issue? I don't recognize this, very transaction. After chatting for a while, they say, oh, this is not us, this is the fraud department. So they pass you to the fraud department. You answer the same questions, you go through the same verification, validation, you share the same information. They say, no, this is not us, this is another team. I mean, you know the story. It is, you contrast and compare. This is highly focused on efficiency. And for the customer, the experience has become very, very frustrating. I remember Amazon, Apple in the early days and still today. They invented this a single person who takes you through the entire store. If you buy accessories, if you buy a tablet or a smartphone, it's the same person. And they're also the one who invented the POS comes to you. Now everyone does it, restaurants. But Apple pretty much invented that. So this experience is so important. So if we operate these processes as a business, not as a back office, not as an expensive commodity, not as the necessary hell, then the paradigm changes completely. And so there is this obsession for in stage 3 for innovation, because probably one of the biggest ideas we had out of good luck. I don't take any credit for that, but one of the good things we did in Procter & Gamble in this area was to appoint process leaders, which were the equivalent for their service of brand managers. And this was revolutionary because all of a sudden a person who was doing a pretty dull work became the queen, the king of the jungle, because you become like a brand manager for accounts payables, for payroll, for banking, for payables, for procurement, and all for order to cash. So you own, and this is what drives, fundamentally innovation, because it's not just surviving at the best possible cost, but it becomes like for any product, like for any service that we commercialize in our business, it is now about innovating. It is a pricing, it is cost, it is a market shares in a way, and it is innovation. So this becomes an engine for continuous value creation within the business. And you see how the operating engine is also the operating model is also evolving. Now customer centricity, in this case, we are talking, of course, internal customers for the most part. It is becoming predominant, and you become centric on the business units, of course, you have to standardize to a large extent. You have to drive scale. We did outsourcing. We did offshore in Manila and Costa Rica. But fundamentally, you become customer centric. And one tool that in Procter & Gamble, some of you who were, I saw Vito, a pleasure to see you, Vito, and others, business leaders on this call, you remember this joint business plan with a business. So this is not about running back office as a mandate, to Tony's point, but it is about inviting the opportunity to literally become more customer centric, join business plans and so forth. So this is with stage 3, where you become more integrated, and the focus becomes truly constantly innovating processor as a servicer, so that they stay ahead of the pack, they stay in the lead. And
All
with
right.
that, on to the last stage.
Thank you, Filippo. And I know many of you have lived through this journey. I see Philippe Coffin, Pierre Elias, Shalini, and many of our folks that actually were instrumental in driving some of these changes. And if you remember, in around 2008, 2010, where we literally, I think, Filippo, in total, we probably had about 8 Harvard Business Review stories written about the GBS model. And a lot of that was really, I think, in many ways, going past efficiency and effectiveness, coming out with, these ideas such as, creating these, rooms for interactivity using video, and so on and so forth. These were big ideas at that time, but we all recognize that even that is insufficient, right? The world changes. About 10 years ago, data science was a relatively new topic. We used to call them analysts at P&G. Over the last 5 years or so, that has gotten solidified as AI and new technologies come in. And it's important for any good organization to have their internal processes stay one jump ahead of technology evolution, which is why great organizations are also leading the charge for all of that change. And that's really what we're talking about here for stage 4, right? So the question is, given those three drivers, running as a business, which is the open market mindset, we work in the open market. We don't work in the small company called Procter and Gamble. What you need to do to drive leadership in the marketplace. One of the things is obviously, what we all recognize is agility these days and the startup mentality and stuff like that. But I think we in Procter and Gamble kind of tweaked that a little bit. We said, yes, on top of that, we have to find a way to drive adoption through commercialization techniques, right? Procter and Gamble is brilliant at commercializing products. Well, if you've got service managers or product managers for each of your internal services, such as accounting and payroll and stuff like that, would it help if you were able to commercialize it to drive better value and adoption, right? And that's really what we're talking about here on the top. In the middle, what's the best way to have accountability for outcomes and have other people follow? The difference between internal functions and the rest of the world is that, if you don't mandate stuff, which we are saying you really don't want to overdo it, how do you ensure that people follow you? How do you manage by influence, lead by influence? And the answer to that is you create a movement, right? You lead by fellowship. And that's really, some of the techniques around that which come into play in the middle. And of course, what's the engine? What's the operating engine that drives this constant change in your processes? And that's really the organization DNA. And we talk about, how to drive changes in the DNA of the organization so you become a continuous disruptor, right? And these are really, some of the thoughts, and in the book, we've got a chapter dedicated to all of this. As Filippo mentioned, this was inspired obviously by the work over 3 decades at Procter and Gamble, but this has been fine-tuned and honed as part of a new company, Inixia. Filippo and I have had the opportunity to work with 100 different very large companies. And you start to see something very interesting. Speaking for myself, when I first left Procter and Gamble, I felt like, hey, GBS is an old topic. It's been done. Doesn't everybody do offshoring, outsourcing, all that kind of stuff? And the reality is we figured out that not really. There are pieces of this that actually are the #1 priority for boards of directors. The desire to drive transformation, whether digital or not, is the #1 priority for most boards of directors. The technologies may have changed, but the approaches, strategic approaches, leadership approaches, how do you create an ever-changing model? How do you constantly drive in an agile manner internal change? That is evergreen. And hopefully we've given you some tips and ideas on what that looks like. Filippo, take you back to the complete model.
This is the overall summary, and the reason why we talk here stage by stage is because given the landscape, the size of the page, we have to shorten some of the words, which makes it difficult to read. But this is just the final summary. This running operations, running processes, services as a business is really, really something that we thought was profound, because, and again, thank you to all of you who contributed, who supported, because this forces the mindset of an open market. If you're running as a business, you cannot mandate your products to consumers, to customers. You have to bring adoption. Now, adoption in the business is market shares, for the most part. And the way we measure in processes, the adoption, the market shares as adoption. So again, you create a pull rather than a push. In summary, in this model, we are reflecting much what we did in Procter & Gamble, and to stay intellectually honest, I have to say perhaps a bit more, because some of this component we didn't get to truly implement, apply in Procter and Gamble. Perhaps, I was not able to, or the conditions were not in place. But this is 90% of, I will say, what we have done and or learned in Procter and Gamble, and then there is another 10, 15%, which Tony and I have learned outside. So with that, we stop here. We have 20, 25 minutes for a conversation, which is, frankly, is the best part of this webinars. And if you don't have any, hey, we will give you 30 minutes back, which you may remember the program we run in Procter & Gamble pretty effectively. But hopefully there will be the opportunity to hear from friends and to share notes.
Thank you. Thank you both so much for sharing. And please, to our audience here, ask us any questions to Filippo and to Tony, either through the Q&A function or the chat. And I would like to kick off this conversation with, because one of you mentioned about this being a continuous disruptor and this culture, and how do we embrace it? From your experience that you've seen, any industries or any areas where you feel that they've been leading the charge, obviously the tech, but in general, in terms of being able to maintain these culture and any best practices there other than what you've shared from a culture perspective, or not?
I can start. Filippo, of course, please jump in. Ileana, that's a fabulous question, and of course the mind jumps directly into tech, but that's not the only place, as you correctly point out. The interesting thing is, if you kind of go back and look at some of the great business books, Built to Last and stuff like that, they talk about creating cultures that for companies that are built to last, that keep going on forever and ever. And at the heart of all of that is, of course, culture. And so, when we kind of think about iconic companies, whether it's 3M, whether, in some shape or form, and I know GE is not necessarily the best example, having had its fair share of problems over and over, but it is still iconic. It goes through painful periods and it reinvents itself, right? And at the heart of all of this is the culture, which is, I know, where you and several other people play, which is how do you build that culture? And it's really, really important because that's the underpinning. I am, of course, going to pick the overused example of Netflix because they've disrupted their own business model 4 times, from mail and DVDs to obviously streaming, to original content, to international content. And yes, it is overused, but the fact of the matter is that their winning formula is not technology. Their winning formula is pushing their organizations to come out with ideas to disrupt themselves. And the minute you're able to do that, of course, you've got it. Procter and Gamble, we must talk about P&G because there is a saying which is posted in the archives around, take away all of our technology and all of our businesses, and in a few years we will reinvent ourselves. Well, that's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about culture here.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Filippo.
No, I was just nodding my full agreement. What I think Procter & Gamble did very well on the culture is the ability to define what is the behaviors they want to say, and as a result, what is the culture? Because the culture is the result, is frank, the way people behave. And in the way in the people behave according to the reward system. So for those of you who are in Procter and Gamble in the late 2010s, it is clear that Procter and Gamble did in a couple of times in those 10, 15 years, there was a major shift in the culture, and that happened amazing for 120,000 people at the time. It happened within 9, 12 months. And that was the clarity of the reward and the clarity of the behaviors, and that drove the culture. So this is an interesting subject on and by itself. But to Tony's point, stage 4 is where we truly would like to see as a result of the behaviors and the capabilities built out in the previous stages. This is what should translate into an ongoing mindset, the mindset and the skill set required.
There are. Oh, sorry, Ileana, please go ahead. I was just going to point to some of the open questions.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So, Andrea, Miguel, Paul, we see a few questions there. Others, of course, please feel free to add yours. Filippo, well, I'll kick off. Paul is asking, what's the best way to leverage AI in a best-in-class GBS organization? Something that's top of mind for most folks. Well, look, the fact of the matter is that, AI is revolutionary. AI is also hyped. And so Paul's question is really important, because how do you separate the power from the hype, right? And there are 3 principles that I personally have always used. The first is that use cases matter, not the technology. So vendors will sell you the technology, right? Please buy our AI technology and it will make your morning coffee for you. We know that that's not the case. I mean, that doesn't happen, right? So the first thing is you have to look for existing use cases. I'll give you an example. About 8 years ago, I was trying to set up a meeting with about 100 different executives just as part of external connectivity at P&G, as I was doing some work there on disruption. And I did not realize until much later that one of the admin assistants of a small company that my own admin was working with happened to be a robot, not an individual, right? This was 8 years ago, right? You kind of think about it, and that was my aha moment, because replacing admin assistants, is that possible as a technology? Probably not today. Yeah, hopefully not for many years. But doing the calendaring function independently, you had people 8 years ago in small companies where the admin assistant to the CEO of a small company was a robot. That's what I mean by use cases. Technology has a lot of potential. Very few use cases are proven. And part of your job is to figure out what use cases exist and use them. So that's one. Within GPS or within processes, of course, the second principle is decision making, right? Processes, business processes, finance or HR or whatever, is a combination of, bringing in the data, processing the data, and making some decisions. More and more of those decisions, whether a claim being made by a vendor or a customer is valid or not. Some of that you can train AI to make that decision. So look for decisions, again, where there are proven use cases, and then implement AI for those decisions. And then the third principle really is that take the AI and start to train your users and people, because there are many more decisions that they make than any GBS organization is ever going to figure out what to make. And so, the more you kind of open it up to the company, the more powerful you become. So thank you. Great question, Paul. Filippo, over to you for
that's
a couple of other questions. Yeah.
That's perfect. Yeah, I cannot see the other questions here beyond Paul.
I'm sorry, did you say you cannot? I can read them out. Miguel says, thank you, extremely valuable. Can this model be applied to mid-sized companies or even startups? What would you recommend to modify, Filippo?
Yeah, so if I understand Miguel correctly, the question is the applicability of this model is actually for startup could be easier and better. What is interesting, and I don't know if that was part or implicit in your question, but what will be interesting is how do you bring this startup mentality in in a large corporation. I believe the notion that you create accountability, which in a startup there is no confusion. You have the by the sheer number of people involved. I think that could be very, very fruitful. So, of the three drivers, I would offer on the fly. I haven't thought enough about it, Miguel, and I will certainly do. But I believe that the three drivers, the one of accountability is probably the one that resonates the most in translating the startup mindset to a corporation. In by contrast, this model for a startup is just natural. It's just perfect. Okay, tell me if I didn't answer correctly.
The interesting, yes, fully agree, Filippo. Some of this may be more intuitive in smaller organizations. A lot
Yeah.
of the model here, what we talk about is going across silos. Thank you, Miguel. Great question. Andrea De Moro. Hey, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. Filippo, I will give this to you as well. Andrea asks, thank you for the inspiring session. Great to see you. How do you adapt business transformation techniques to work outside of P&G, where we have a culture that's often less open to continuous transformation? Filippo, you and I do a lot of work with ex-P&Gs that struggle with this. So please go ahead. Yeah.
So sorry, so the question, because again, I cannot say all the questions here. So the question is, how do we apply this mindset outside of P&G?
Yeah, and the challenge is that many of the companies where ex-P&G folks work, the culture is not open to continuous transformation.
Oh, yeah. Well, even in P&G, I have to be honest, I am every time we moved work into GBS, I recall we went from initially we had about 3,500 people. That was prior to my time. Then the scope went up to about 5,500, and then we the outsourcing. And about 2,500 of our colleagues became employees of providers. So, and then, long story short, we grew up to about 6,500, 6 to 7,000 P&Gers, and about as much sourcing. So the organization became about 14 to 15,000 people in total between P&Gers and partners. So just to be clear on the numbers. In moving work into P&G from other functions, I have to be candid with my peer colleagues. It was always interesting conversations, and I lost every time a few pounds in negotiating because everyone was saying, "Oh, GBS is the secret weapon of Procter and Gamble. Oh, we are so proud that GBS is named best in class." But then when it came to, "Hey, why don't we move? There's 250 people doing this work to GBS because the work belongs in GBS. The work is operational in nature. The work is scalable. The work is." At the point, all the antibodies kicked in because the reality is that we human beings don't like to lose control. So our colleagues were very, very open up until so I'm saying this because this is not just in other companies. In Procter and Gamble was the same story, and the only remedy, the only recipe I found was to articulate the value proposition. And that became a very, very strong message. For example, we declared that per every single dollar of cost that we moved from the business, from the functions onto GBS, we would charge back no more than 75 cents. So we committed to an ongoing saving of 25 cents per dollar. We actually did better than that. We did the 32 cents, but you see the point, right? That put a healthy pressure on the system because if you didn't want to centralize, then you had to perform as, there's a 25 cents on the dollar. So in the value proposition, the what's in it for you, why for the business unit, there is nothing to lose, there is all to gain, you continue to stay in control. This is the best way we found to truly make it happen. TNG was not any easier than other companies. But in my experience, actually, I found other companies now a lot easier. But this articulation of the value, why is right for the business, why is right for you, why your business unit have nothing to lose, it became a narrative, a storytelling, which went very, very well. So my recommendation is there is only one way to do it, is articulating the value, the commercial proposition for the business.
There's one other thing that becomes interesting, Andrea, on top of obviously the perfect answer from Filippo, which is sometimes when you're an ex-P&G person working in another company, sometimes people will look at you like you've got two heads because you've got a vision, you've seen this happen in another company, but nobody else around you understands what you're talking about. And so we get called into a lot of these situations, Filippo and myself, where part of what we can do is to kind of say, yeah, no, what you're talking about here is not unusual. This actually has happened in several other companies, but it's a tough question. Thank you, Andrea. Filippo, another one for you. Paul
Also,
is
yeah,
out.
there is, I think Charlene is asking a very, very good question on my bio-industry or some of the ecosystem. You may recall, Charlene, that fascinating. I was talking today here at a conference, incidentally in Rome, about my experience when I started. Every time was a bloody change management. I grew up in an environment, like probably most of us were a bit more seasoned, where every change was a disaster for several months. Every change was a pain for a long time. And in the last 15 years, it was amazing how we didn't do, everything was impeccable. Remember the order to cash in North America, remember the ERP in Europe, Gillette integration, just impeccable execution. And so in the change management in these foundational systems, I would apply exactly the same logic, which is we start with a value with all the clear accountability and detailed project management. And on the biopharma, honestly, I don't have enough competence to enough knowledge to answer completely your question. All I can say is that Tony and I have collaborated with several pharma companies. And again, the model is applicable 100% in many ways. This is one of those models that are truly science, sector, and geography independent. But again, I don't feel I can go into the biotech doing a complete job. But thank you for asking.
Thank you.
Just,
And
just
thank you both. We are literally getting close to the end. So, and I know we still have some questions. So I want to make sure that you have time to, give us some
wrap up.
final thoughts or round this up before we head into the end of this webinar. But this has been wonderful. And if you can share also your contact information so that if people want to continue to reach out, that they can.
Well,
Any
just a
final
quick
thoughts?
one, Ilana, on earlier moment. I mean, probably me. I am a believer that technologies are a great enabler, but they are not uh, the answer, the solution per se. I don't remember in 40 years one instance where the technology was the answer. Has always been a great enabler, but never the solution per se. And if you are in this business, the one thing you have to become truly professional at is a process understanding, a process analysis. These are the two skills which are truly fundamental and prevent becoming a commodity. So we need to understand the processes better than anyone else. Otherwise, the work can be done offshore in low-cost locations and truly mapping, analyzing. So then technology plays a role, but plays at the end. We need to be very careful. For example, and you know this, so forgive me for saying something you already know, but we need to be careful that we don't automate processes which are not streamlined, not standardized, because it becomes a disaster. So we need to follow a path, and technology, in my experience, comes at the very end as an important final enabler. But again, as Ilana said, we can reconnect offline. We're up on time, but it's been such a pleasure. And these are the 10 tips that we will leave with you, Troy.
Yeah. So please feel free to reach out to either Filippo or myself. Ileana, maybe we'll send your email and other contact details, or LinkedIn also works. And as Filippo said, Ileana, I suspect will make this material available to people as they need it. But we want to distill the things that you all can take from this into 10 tips. So thank you very much from my side. Filippo, over to you. Final words.
Thank you. These are the 10 tips which are part of this format. The presenters are required to provide the 10 tips, which is a brilliant idea. So we did it. But again, there is nothing in these 10 tips that we haven't talked. The only probably interesting one is number 8, the value for the business in process innovation is, in fact, we saved $2 billion in Procter & Gamble, which in 9 years, which contributed 4% to the margins of profit margins of Procter & Gamble. But we have $9 million finance certified. So this is not us making big claims. Okay, finance come in and certify the part of the stamp of $9 billion in value creation in the business, which didn't flow through GBS. So there is a number 8 is a truly an interesting one.
Awesome. Thank you, Ileana. Over to you.
Thank you, Ilana. And
Thank you.
for joining. I hope we will stay connected, we will stay in touch, and wish we had the time to have a chat one-on-one, but we will do offline, so please reach out.
Absolutely. We'll have to schedule a second part for this, and especially because change is becoming the constant, right? So thank you so much to both of you for sharing these great ideas. Thank you for I'll do the shameless plug on your book, because I've seen a lot of great reviews, and I'm sure everybody's going to find it very helpful. And thank you for sharing your 10 tips and all of your experience and expertise. Let me share my screen for a quick moment. Please get involved, sign up for updates, support our foundation, partner with us, and volunteer, join, or start a chapter. It's this community of experts and leaders that we have that really can make a difference in changing the world. So make sure that you join in some way or form. All of our recordings are going to be available either on our site, pgalums.com, or on our YouTube page as well, including this one. So make sure you follow us there and send us an email, hello@pgalums.com, with your thoughts, ideas, questions, anything that you might need. We're always happy to hear from everyone. And I invite you to join us next month with Loic Tassel, who is a PAG Europe president, who will share with us how to focus on focus. And that'll be on May 14th, 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Again, thank you, Tony. Thank you, Filippo, for being here. And I hope everybody has a wonderful day wherever in the world you are. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.